So, can you please tell everybody like why Japan? Like, why did you decide to come to Japan?
Okay, so initially my first company is a kind of a Filipino subsidiary of the Japanese company, and so it was very easy for them to offer me a job in Japan. But I guess if I was offered a different country, like maybe Korea or the US, I would still accept the job offer. Yeah.
So at the time there was no like, oh man, I really got to go to Japan. Like Japan is full of people with colorful hair. I got to go there too. Like there's nothing.
Uh, I would say that I was also a fan of like anime and other stuff in
Hmm.
Japan, but it was mostly the idea of going into, I guess, another adventure, like kind of reopening a new chapter in my life that kind of was the most attractive point
Hmm.
for me that made me decide to come to Japan.
That's cool. I can get that feeling. I get that feeling a lot. Even just moving to a new place within Japan makes me feel like that. Like it's a new era of my life, even though I moved,
Mm.
3 kilometers.
Yeah.
So you said this is the first time I'm hearing about this. Actually, we talk, we chat a lot.
Mm.
But so your company actually offered you an international transfer. You didn't have to go seek it out or anything.
No, so since they are affiliated with a Japanese company within Japan, it was easier for them to offer me a job. And also, processing is also easier for them since they're already familiar with every, I don't know, the stuff
Hmm.
process. I think they're also in touch with some people in the embassy to make sure that all the employees meet the requirements.
Wow, that sounds like a. Did you consider like the path to Japan being like a staircase? It sounds like you had an escalator or an elevator into Japan.
Yeah, I guess
Hmm.
it was also a contractual position,
Yeah.
so I guess not as many requirements if as opposed to like getting a direct job offer from a Japanese company, I
Hmm.
guess.
Hmm. And you've had a couple of jobs in Japan since you came, right?
Just I would say just two technically, yeah.
Okay. And then if you from what you've heard from other people or what you've seen, would you say like what would you say the pros and cons are between the way you came to Japan and like maybe a more traditional route that you've heard of?
Mhm. Um, so I guess the more traditional route would require like, additional expenses on my side.
Okay.
Like they have a different insurance system, I think, as far as I know, compared to my route and like medical
Hmm.
exams. Or I'm not sure if that was actually based on new laws because I heard that they added new laws uh after the pandemic, I guess.
Hmm.
So it could also be that I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you think, for example, do you think there are any limitations to doing it the way you did it? Did you ever wish like, oh man, I wish
Mm,
I'd come in and gotten like, a normal non-contractor job with like an engineering visa?
mm.
Like, were there any downsides to coming in the way you did?
Yeah, so of course I'm not considered as part of the company that I'm working under as a contractual. I'm technically still employed under my company in the Philippines.
Hmm.
So that way I was paying taxes in the Philippines and here in Japan. So that was kind of a bummer, I guess, since it made a lot of deductions in my the pay that I received. I mean,
Yeah, that's.
mm,
I would say that is more than kind of a bummer. That's like really depressing. Wow, wow.
yeah.
Did you get any benefits out of it? For example, like, did you get was it easier for you to send money back home, for example, if you wanted to through your company, or like was there anything you got out of paying Philippine taxes?
So I was able to get the still continue paying the benefits in the Philippines. So I would be able to receive, I think it was in for insurance as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also like uh, mm, since I have I was receiving direct payment from my payroll back
Mm-hmm.
in the Philippines. It was easier to send money to my family, especially with the after the this very sudden fall of yen. It was very hard to like send money back home
Mm-hmm.
without the amount of there being like I mean having a very exorbitant amount of deductions.
Yeah.
So that was kind of tough, but since I had that bank in the Philippines, it was easier to send them money.
Yeah, I felt that too. Sending money back to the U.S., it went from what, like 116 yen to the dollar to 147 yen to the dollar, and suddenly you're losing
Yeah.
30 yen on every dollar. I don't know what it was like for the
Mhm.
Philippine peso, but I imagine it was similar. Just disastrous.
Not as bad, but yeah, it was still pretty bad.
Yeah. Did so for example, if you were offered the opportunity to come to Japan through your company, was there also a chance that your company would suddenly say, "Actually, we want you back in the Philippines"? Did you have any control over that, or was there any expectation that they would give you a lot of advance warning?
Um, I personally said that I wanted some advance notification. I'm
Hmm.
not sure for other people, but as far as I knew, the contract was a 3 month renewal basis.
Okay.
But since my project specifically didn't have a lot of people that could kind of step into the role in case of downsizing or if I chose to go home, something like that. It was easier for me to get a heads up, like I guess a year before.
Hmm.
Is yeah, that's what I think.
That's good. A little job security. 3 months is
Mm,
such a
yeah,
short contract. It seems hard to move over suddenly and then suddenly go back home. Did they give you
yeah.
relocation support of any kind? Did they help you move things, or did they set up the apartment or the furniture or any of that?
So the another good thing I would say is about coming the way I did is that they have a dormitory system
Hmm.
set up already for all of the assignees is what we were called. And so I technically had a housemate or a roommate. I am not sure what the difference is. Um, and then so the house is already set up. I just have to move in my stuff. And yeah, of course we had some like kind of internal arrangements, but aside from that, things went smoothly, I guess.
That's definitely an upside. Like if you see in the server, people move over. They're like, "How do I get an apartment? Should I get a temporary one? Where
Yeah,
should I live? What do I do with my bank
yeah.
account?" Like there's all that stuff. And it sounds like for
Mhm.
you, it was really just a matter of bringing a suitcase over and everything is there. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. The apartment also had like furnishings already from they had a what's that called again? What's Sarkland? Uh, I think it was a furniture rental company
Mm-hmm.
that made the arrangements to like replace stuff if they're broken or and they just brought those stuff over. You just have to contact them. So it was really fairly easy for me to kind of adjust when I came here.
That's good then. Is this kind of opportunity open to a lot of people at that company, or do you have to be like in a
Uh,
very specific, like a very specific specialty or a certain level? Like you have to be mid-career, senior, or something.
so their priority is like mid to senior
Mm-hmm.
levels. But as far as I know, as long as your tech stack aligns with what the client is looking for, they would consider you for the position.
So people in your former company could then just if they wanted to come to Japan, they could talk to their manager or something internally and say, "Hey, like I really want to go to Japan. Is there anything that's open that matches me?" Is that how it would work?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So what happened with me was I was actually working in Linux
Mm-hmm.
for some time, but that was development related.
Mm-hmm.
So the project that opened in Japan was Linux related, but testing. And so there wasn't a lot of people in that niche.
Mm-hmm.
It also helped that I had additional knowledge from college
Mm-hmm.
within that niche. So I was kind of boosted up
Yeah.
for the the Japan assignment as compared to my other peers.
That sounds really. That sounds like an alignment of the stars. It's like everything just like aligned properly, and then suddenly you had this
Yeah,
conjunction. That's great for
yeah,
you.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting to hear that then, because a lot of people do ask if it's possible to transfer to Japan internally, and my almost instant answer is no. Because when I
Mm,
think about that, I think about like big multinationals from the West. So I'm thinking of like Google or Microsoft or Facebook,
mm,
and generally
mhm.
they just don't like if you're in Mountain View and you're like, oh, I want to live in Tokyo. They're just kind of like, why? Like, what do we get out of it?
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Okay, so it's interesting to hear that's an opportunity. Would you recommend your company to people in the Philippines who want to come to Japan? Would you say like, oh yeah, you can join the company, and then if you meet the needs, that's a good way to get over?
At the moment, I would say no,
Okay.
just because it's harder to send people over, I think. A lot of companies here in Japan, I'm not sure about the startups. I think startups are hiring continuously, but for bigger companies like the one I worked for,
Mm-hmm.
they are having like cost cutting.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very hard to go through the same process as I did.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense then. Do Yeah, that makes a lot of sense then. Um, did you feel when they brought you over, did you feel that they gave you official onboarding in terms of not only professional onboarding but also kind of like cultural onboarding? Like this is how you should interface with Japanese companies. Like these are business behaviors
Mm.
that differ between Japan and the Philippines. Did you get any of that?
I would say I had like three orientations that time.
Mm-hmm.
And also like there was a welcome party, but the problem is that I'm not sure if they're still doing that right now
Mm-hmm.
because I arrived I guess 6 months before the pandemic, so like just in time I was able to experience uh, both like the professional onboarding and like also meeting up with some of my peers. But for those who arrived here like in the middle or just now, I guess it was kind of more difficult
Mm-hmm.
for them.
Did Did that work? The initial 3 month contract work, did that involve a lot of working with native Japanese speakers, or was it mostly working with people who also spoke English, or what kind of makeup was it?
So the company that I joined
Mm-hmm.
as a contractor for was a global company. So most of the workers there are like Japanese people who could speak English
Mm-hmm.
or like other nationalities like Chinese. There were like Chinese, Korean, and a lot of Filipinos actually in
Mm-hmm.
that company. Work from other agencies as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was easier to integrate, I would say, as opposed to like a more traditional Japanese work company.
Yeah. So did they have to give you any language training at all before you came over? Were they like, okay, we need you to take this 6 week Japanese course to get the basics? Like none of that was necessary.
So before I actually came to Japan,
Mm-hmm.
just when I started working actually in my former company, they provided us up to N4 training.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually pretty much equipped to get through day-to-day
Yeah.
stuff. But when I came here, there was still that. sense of difference between textbook Japanese and daily Japanese. So it was still a bit difficult for me to adjust in that context.
Did you have any coworkers who had no Japanese at all who came over?
Yeah, yeah, there
Hmm.
was like two of my coworkers who didn't pass N5 at all.
Hmm.
And sometimes they would ask me to help them translate, and I try, but N4 is not as good as um for translations, I would say.
Yeah, it can be difficult, especially when you have like little subtle differences where you look at the dictionary definition, and even though you see the words in English, you're like, I still don't understand what this means. Like, what is this for?
Yeah,
Like
the
bills
I
and
think
stuff.
the biggest problem I had was that I knew the textbook Japanese word, but if I tell it to a Japanese person, they would not understand because the context, I guess, is different.
Hmm. Yeah. I think for me when I first came here, a lot of that stuff was around bills, like the different words for bills.
Mm,
And if you just
mhm.
tried to say like something is a bill, it wouldn't click for a Japanese person because they're thinking of a different word. They're thinking it's like this isn't a bill, it's a hagaki, or this is a receipt.
Uh,
This
uh-huh.
is they were all different
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah.
And it was hard to because the concept is different, right? Like in English, a bill is a
Mhm,
bill is a bill. Like it could be
mhm,
electronic, it could be paper, it could come in like a postcard, anything. But in Japanese,
mhm,
it's more
mhm,
segmented. Um,
mhm.
it's very difficult like that. Do you feel
Yeah.
like if you had not been there, your friends who didn't pass N5, do you think they still would have been able to lead okay lives in Japan? Do you think Japanese having Japanese at all is like necessary to live here?
I think they would have had a harder time, but at the same time, they already had friends who were working here who that they could also ask for help.
Hmm.
But for me, I was basically by myself. So I also tried to be like I well I can do this by myself. I have N4 blah blah
Hmm.
blah.
Hmm.
But at that point I realized that maybe I need to improve my Japanese a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it always helps, right? Like the more you can speak the
Yeah.
actual native language in the country, the more you can find out. Um,
Hmm.
do did you find like when you first came here, did you find there was like a big let's say like a Filipino support network where you would ask like a friend from the Philippines how you do something here and they're like I don't know, but actually I know a guy who knows a guy or something like that. But it was always in this like support network. Was there something like that?
Yeah, so since my company is a Philippine subsidiary, they also have a lot of assignees here.
Hmm.
So even though I wouldn't say I had close friends at that time,
Hmm.
there were a lot of senpais and uh, friends of friends that were here that I could ask for help, mainly for work related stuff and even like bike recommendations. They would give me some advice on that.
Hmm. How was there any way that that's kind of different from Tokyo Dev? Like, Tokyo Dev is just a community of people who are in or want to come to Japan, but was there a way that it was substantially different having people from your own country and culture?
I guess it's more of the since Filipino is our mother tongue, it was easier to relay stuff that I had in my mind
Hmm.
as opposed to like having a conversation with someone in English. Although a lot of Filipinos are very good at English, sometimes there are contexts that are not translated well, or I think some Filipinos would like directly translate it in their head, some words in their head, and it does not come up well in English, something like that, or the the also I guess um at least Americans have like a more direct approach. We're like a bit more open. We kind of try to adapt to um the personality, I guess, of the person we're talking to. Just or maybe that's a stereotype I have that a lot of Filipinos are very adaptive.
That makes sense. And something is very important when you come to Japan. It might be that people who come to Japan and succeed are tend to be more adaptive types. It might just be
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of bias as well, which is not necessarily a bad
Mm.
thing. Um, you mentioned that you felt that sometimes Americans are more open. Were there times where you had questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking a Japanese person, but you did feel more comfortable asking a Filipino person, or more comfortable asking an American instead of either? Like, were there cases like that where you're like, oh, this question is more for this culture?
Mm-hmm. So, I guess I would say that I'm more I'm more easily embarrassed to ask for help from a Japanese person than a Filipino person. I guess it comes from a sense of um, I don't want them to see me struggling to adapt into this company. So I would rather ask a Filipino person for
Hmm.
help than other nationalities, I guess.
That makes sense. Is there any sense of judgment from non-Filipinos? Do you ever feel like you're being judged? Like, oh, you're from a developing nation. Like, of course you don't know that. Like, do you feel that at all?
Um, um, hmm. I would say that there is a tendency for people to mansplain whichever nation they come from. But in terms of like me as a Filipino myself, um, I, there was a time when I talked with some American people,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, "Oh, you have no accent at all. I thought you were American." And I'm like, I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a compliment.
Uh, yeah.
Uh,
It's hard to tell with Americans because sometimes Americans don't have much international experience either. Yeah.
uh-huh. But
Do,
I guess with Japanese people, it's mostly like they're trying to be nice, they're trying to be polite. So when they say "Oh, nihongo jozu,"
mhm.
something like that, I think
Yeah.
some people get offended. But for me, I think they're just trying to be polite.
Hmm. I think they are too. It's never like this dig at you saying like, oh, your Japanese is so bad, but I can't say that. Like, it's
Yeah,
nothing like that.
yeah,
I agree. It's
yeah.
just
For me, it
politeness.
it felt like they were just appreciative that you're at least trying to learn the language.
Mm-hmm. Then I kind of got lost there. Lost in my train of thought. My train of thought
Sorry.
went to like Shinjuku Station or something.
Oh.
um, so I was wondering about this because clearly you're from two minorities in Japan. One because you're a Filipina, and two because you're a woman. And you mentioned this before with the mansplaining. Um,
Yeah.
does this ever affect you at work? Do people assume a certain level of competence or knowledge or anything like that because you're a woman or because you're from the Philippines?
Mm, I at that time I felt like I had to prove myself more, that I'm more capable. Not because they think I'm I guess not smart, but because they think I'm a bit more fragile in that sense, that sometimes they would, instead of asking me, this person would ask another person from my team for help with like carrying equipment, and I'm like, oh, it's fine, I'm here anyway. They're like, oh, this might be very heavy. Like, that's why we have like those
Hmm.
what's that called, the cart
Yeah.
with a wheel, something
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
that. That's why we have those, you know. Yeah.
That's it's interesting that you mentioned that because I've noticed that with myself as well. And you met me. I don't look like a fragile guy. And
Uh-huh.
and then like a waitress will come over with a tray of food. I'll just take it with one hand and just like, oh, it's so heavy. Be careful. I'm just like, it's okay. We're
It's
delivery
fine.
guys.
Don't be.
Yeah, I get that. But there hasn't been anything technical on your side where people are doubting, for example, like since you've been in QA, like you do some tests, you find something wrong, and maybe you have like an idea of a root cause. Do people just like take that and go, like as you would expect them to professionally?
I'm not sure if this is because I am Filipino, but I feel like it's more because I'm a woman that sometimes I someone would ask me a technical thing, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's like this,
Hmm.
but this is a current limitation," something like that. And he would be like, like I kind of don't like that when people are very they
They
it's
don't
kind
just
of obvious
accept
that
it.
they don't yeah they don't like your answer basically.
Yeah.
But he would ask that to other people like guys, and they would be like, why don't you ask her, she's the expert on that. And
Yeah.
he's like, but
Mm.
so like yeah, I guess it's more because I'm a woman.
That's very disappointing and
Yeah.
unfortunately all too common anywhere, not just Japan.
Mm.
Do are you so for example in the West, women are often expected to be like always on. Like you're supposed to be cheerful, you smile. If you're not cheerful or smiling, then
Mhm.
you're suddenly angry for some reason.
Uh-huh.
Did you have that? Did you have that feeling of that kind of expectation when you worked with Japanese people?
um I mm, I was told that I have an RBF.
I think you can say. I think you can say that. I don't think we're. I don't think we're censoring here. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I was told even before when I just started my job that I have a resting bitch face.
Yeah.
That sometimes I would just be like, I was just
You're
staring
thinking,
into
right? Yeah.
nothing, or like yeah, I'm thinking, and they would be scared to approach me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I don't think it's like a Japanese thing, but like a something that people would be like if they see you with that face on, they'd be like, "Oh, this person is kind of scary to
Yeah.
approach."
I get that too. Like I told you just before this interview, I was watching the other interview I did with me, and I was looking at my face. I'm like, that's a resting bitch face, Scott. You got to do better in the interview.
Yeah, most of the time though, I'm more concerned that I can't control my eyebrows. Sometimes they're like uneven. Or I'm not sure if it's my eyebrows or my eyes, but they're like uneven. Sometimes they do like this,
Hmm.
and um, sometimes I'd be like, "Hold on," and I would like fix them because it feels like an involuntary muscle even. But I realize that when I look in the mirror, that I look kind of mean sometimes. Not even the RBF.
Yeah.
I just look
Yeah.
mean sometimes.
Because of the eyebrows.
Yeah, yeah, they're like this
Hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
even
like
know.
100% Spock all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like they would be like this person is like in battle mode every time.
That's very difficult. Have your managers or anybody ever told you this? Like, have they given you feedback on it or like suggestions?
Um, Not manager, but I think one of my seniors actually told me like you look like you were about to punch like our manager. He told me that after a meeting because I was very upset with what he said, and I think
Yeah.
it showed on my face, and I was just like this the entire meeting. My senior was like, you have to like be aware of your facial expression sometimes." Yeah,
That's a high
sometimes I
bar to
can't help
clear.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Does wow. Do you feel like you're more strictly judged than other women in the department and like other women peers that you work with because of like your facial expressions? Like if they can control theirs better and you always look angry.
Mm. I guess some of my close friends actually have very like uh polite expressions. Like that's their expression by default. And one of my other friends is like she's always smiling by default. So I think more people tend to approach them first instead of me. Or like even if I'm there, they would like look at me and then turn into to the other person instead. Yeah, there was that kind of thing, I guess.
Do you feel like guys have the same kind of judgment on them? Like would you just kind of go to the
Mm.
guy regardless of their face or do some guys just have, constantly angry expressions and you're like, "Oh, maybe not him."
And for me, instead of the facial expression, I would go for the general vibe of the person.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I would like observe them and they would break into a smile, and I'm like, oh, this person can be approached. But sometimes they're like the entire time just look like they're not having fun at all, and they were like forced by their mom or someone else to come to that event, and I'd be like, I'm not sure if I can approach this person.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I never even thought about it in events, right? Like sometimes I'm in events, it's just like I'm nervous. I don't know what to do. I don't know anybody. The food's not very good. I'm just kind of sitting there like,
Uh,
oh, maybe I shouldn't have come. And then maybe that's why nobody's talking to me.
yeah, I guess, but but since I talked to you online, I was more open to like approaching you, I guess.
hmm And then it had to have something to do with my colorful shirts. Well, not colorful. It's like, oh, my hair, his shirt, we're a match. I can talk to this guy.
Oh, I think there is something with people wearing like floral shirts that make them easier to approach.
I'll have to remember that then. Um,
Yeah.
wow. That's your tip. That's your tip to take away from the video, everybody. You just
Yeah.
gotta wear floral shirts to be more approachable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I was wondering about as a woman in a Japanese company is something I often saw in more traditional Japanese workplaces is that
Mhm.
women, regardless of their role or their seniority, were expected to prepare tea for their coworkers or prepare tea and snacks for the guests or, handle garbage cans
Mm.
and that kind of stuff. Was there anything like that in your workplace?
Um, hmm. I was told actually by my previous manager that they used to have that kind of expectation, but that I shouldn't be in trouble because I'm going into a more global company. So like I guess there's that, but I'm kind of not a neat freak, but I just like cleaning things out of habit. So I tend to do it anyway, and then I guess my other friends or like other people behind me would kind of feel bad and they would start helping me. Yeah, it's more of like that, I guess.
Okay, that's good to hear. I mean, it's good to hear that you weren't expected to do this stuff as like free labor
Mm.
because you're a woman.
Yeah.
Have you ever had people like professionally assume that you were, a cleaner or something because you're Filipino and a woman?
Hmm. Well, I guess not. I don't think I've ever had that experience.
Okay, that's good. Do you have any other experiences like with stereotypes of Filipinos in Japan?
Hmm. Oh, I think there was one time online, and like, um, this is why I say hello talk is not that great. Just name dropping that for everyone. Um, they people have turned it into a dating site. Is my primary complaint about it. But if you approach, I guess Japanese girls on there, they would be more willing to do a call or like just chat with you for a language exchange. But most of the time when guys kind of message me, they're kind of expecting you to go out with them, like not platonically.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's why I stopped using
that's
that app.
disappointing. That's very disappointing. Do you
Yeah.
I'm just like so disappointed by that. Um, it's hard, right, to find a lot of people.
Mhm.
It's hard because like those kinds of sites and stuff. There's like Hello Talk, there's iTalki where you pay for it. There used to be Lang 8
Mhm.
where you would make blog entries and people would correct them.
Mhm.
It feels like there's a step to language exchange where in the beginning you have people who just want to learn the language, and then
Mhm.
you get people who say like, oh yeah, you can learn the language and make friends, and people go to make friends, and it turns into this kind
Mhm.
of like unstated dating slash hookup kind of thing where you have people going, mostly
Mhm.
men, to try to pick up people. Um,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
Mhm.
We had an announcement in the community recently that we are not going to accept that in our community because I feel like it drives people away who are there for the primary
Mhm.
reason. In our
Yeah,
case, to
yeah.
help people who want to be developers in Japan or are. So
Mhm.
it is a very big problem. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm glad you haven't like that's the first thing you it's unfortunate you went through it, but I'm glad that's like the only thing that came to mind when I ask about stereotypes because sometimes stereotypes can be very strong in Japan, you know.
Mhm. Mhm. I guess other people experience it, but for me personally, I haven't experienced the other bad stereotypes.
That's good. Do you think do you have you well I guess I can sort of like dovetail this in, but have you seen any other Filipinos in like lead or management positions outside of your previous company?
Yeah, I think I have um tried to reach out to this one person who used to work in the same company as me, but she's now a QA manager in a different company. But our schedules didn't really align, so it was kind of a bummer. But maybe next time I would like to ask her how she did it. But from what I heard from other people, she's really good at her job.
Hmm.
So I guess it really paid off. There was this other girl who is a development I'm not sure if she's a project manager or a tech lead, but I do know that she still codes. She is in another prefecture, so I haven't really talked to her either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you do run into these foreign stereotypes that are beneficial. People say like, "Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Germans are so timely and organized, like they're natural managers." So I was wondering if there's a
Uh-huh.
cultural aspect there too with Filipinos because it does come up
Uh-huh.
sometimes when you're considering people for roles. I've heard it in the past, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, I think I have tried looking for jobs in Wantedly. So these are more like startups, but more traditional Japanese, I guess.
Hmm.
There was this one interviewer who asked me why I wanted to go into QA, and I said it fit my personality, and he said, "Oh yeah, I guess women are just better at QA because they are more detailed." That's what he said, but I'm like, I haven't really thought of that, but sure, I guess.
Yeah, is that generally what you try to do if something like that comes up in an interview? You just kind of like okay and deflect. Do you have any strategies for that?
Uh, for me, of course, I wouldn't go into a fight. You have to
Yeah,
pick your fights.
right.
Yeah, and that was especially the first interview, I think, for that company. So it was like, yeah, I'd rather just, talk about a different topic. It's better to deflect rather than like go into it deeper and dig a hole for yourself,
Hmm.
or like try to change the mind of the interviewer,
Hmm.
because I doubt we could change their mind.
Yeah. Is that thing kind of common everywhere for you, or does it raise a red flag? Would you be like, actually, I don't know if I want to work at this company, and I wouldn't recommend it to other women? Is there like a difference there for you?
Mm-hmm. So a common question that I usually ask during interviews is that if the company has more female developers. They would usually tell me, we don't have sorry, we don't have women developers, but we do have women working in HR, and that's not the question I
Yeah.
asked. Yeah, so it kind of lowers their standing for my considerations.
Hmm. And do you pass that information on to friends too who are looking for jobs? So like, oh, actually, don't. I decided not to go with company A because they don't have any women developers, and the guy said like a really weird thing about women being natural for QA. Like, do you do that?
Uh-huh.
Do you spread that information to your friends too?
No, I would actually just tell them how my interview went. I think it's more up to them if they decide to pursue that company or not.
Hmm. That makes sense. I mean, it's hard, right? Because sometimes it feels like if you spread that kind of information, you'll get yourself. If it spreads too far and it's traceable to you, you'll get blacklisted from that
Yeah,
company forever.
yeah, that's true as well. Yeah.
Right. Wow. I mean, I think in the past I've talked about some companies in my position where I was very one of the big concerns I had going in was like I wanted a company with a strong interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Mm,
especially
mhm,
with my hearing disability.
mhm,
And I would often run
mm,
into companies who were just like not accommodating in the slightest, and I would
mm,
like in my head, I would blacklist them, and then with other people, I'd be like, I'm sure they're a good company unless you have a disability.
I see, I
Yeah.
see.
So it's hard. It's hard to find that balance for me personally.
Yeah.
Do have people done this to you? They'll be like, they come to you and say like, don't work at that company. Like they're not good for women. They're not good for Filipinos. Like they're not good for foreigners.
Um, yes, I have a friend who was like, "Don't go to traditional Japanese
Hmm.
companies. You will have a hard time." Like he
Yeah.
said. That's he was the one who recommended me to Tokyo Dev actually. Yeah,
Hmm.
he said it's easier to look for international jobs. I mean, jobs in general
Hmm.
through Tokyo Dev because they kind of filter out which companies are more accepting of like non-Japanese workers and have a more, I guess, international culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you just take that advice 100%, or is there a part of you that says like, I would like to, um, like what did you say before? It's like it would be like a new chapter for you. Like I just want to try working in a traditional
Uh,
Japanese company and see if I can, deal
uh,
with it. Do you ever think that?
um, I took his advice in the sense that I applied for job postings under Tokyo Dev, but at the same time, I still wanted to try my hand at having like interviews in Japanese, so I still pursued the traditional companies.
Yeah. How'd those interviews go in Japanese? What did you take away from them?
Um, I realized that for the first two interviews, you can run with just a script. It's very it's uh kind of easier, but
Hmm.
for the third and more subsequent interviews, I guess, um, they kind of go a lot deeper into your career and experiences, so it's kind of hard to just wing it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so for those complete interviews that are completely in Japanese, I would suggest having at least like N2 or a knowledge of like business Japanese um terminologies in order to apply for to have a successful um application in those kinds of companies.
That makes sense. Do you feel like you got anything out of those interviews? Like, did you come away with it like learning lessons other than like, oh, my Japanese isn't quite good enough? Was it a good experience for you overall having done that?
I guess because I worked with this recruiter who provided me with a Japanese interview practice. Um, it was it was just one session, I think, because you had to pay for subsequent sessions. But I took a lot out of that session specifically that was able to help me with how I conducted interviews in general,
Hmm.
uh, not just Japanese interviews.
Do you want to name the recorder or the recruiting company? It sounds like that was really helpful for
Is it
you.
is it is it okay to
Yeah,
do
go
that?
for it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So the recruiter is Ju. Oh damn, I forgot her name. Julianne, I think. But the agency is G Talent.
Okay.
I think they're the international branch under Bizmates. I think yeah.
Under Disney.
Bizmates.
Oh, Bismate. Sorry. I was like Disney. Wow, you were gonna be an Imagineer.
Recruited by Disney.
Yeah, that's big. That's a big name. Do
Yeah.
then, and you said you were able to take information from that and apply it to how you
Mhm.
yourself conduct interviews. Was
Yeah.
there a big difference in how, in your experience with Japanese interviews versus international interviews versus interviews in the Philippines? Like, what were some of the cultural differences or differences in the ways
Hmm.
they conducted them?
Um, for the interviews that I've done in the Philippines were mostly during my pre-graduation.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, there was a phase in college where they let companies go into our college and then recruit people. And so that was a bit more formal in the sense that we had to go in face to face and like wear business smart business business casual. I forgot the
Business
term.
casual, yeah.
Business casual, yeah, business casual clothing in order to go to these interviews. But with since I started applying to jobs in Japan in the middle of the pandemic, I could just go with a formal top and then just jeans.
Oh,
It
like
was
like in a
easier.
call. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I also have heard that if you choose to if the recruiter oh no if the interviewer asks you if you want to go to the company or do the interview online, pick the one where you have to go to the company because you can also get to check the environment that you'll be working on, and that also ticks a box in the company's like kind of checklist, that because they would see that, oh, this person went all the way here even if though they lived somewhere else, because they're really interested in applying for a company. So that's a very useful tip I got from that.
Have you ever had a situation where you were invited, you went to visit a company, and then when you saw like the office, you're like,
Yes, yes, that happened to me definitely.
what was it that turned you off of the company then? If you can
um,
talk about it.
yeah, they didn't hire me anyway, so it should be fine. But I don't think I can name drop the company.
Hmm.
So they are a startup company, so I understand that they're not working in their own building, but the building itself was kind of old and it kind of smelled, old buildings smell like kind of dusty. And I have really bad allergies from dust, so that was
Hmm.
kind of I was kind of considering
Yeah.
during that point. And then um, they were not answering my calls. I was there earlier and I was trying to ask if I could go in and kind of leave my stuff and then leave for lunch and come back, something like that. They weren't answering my calls at all. It was already lunchtime.
Hmm.
And then so that was kind of another thing. And then the third thing was that everything was a mess everything in the office was a mess, and there weren't even distinctions on which area was for developers, which area was for the CTO. Everyone was just in a long round table. A long round no, it was a elongated table, and everyone was just working there, and there were piles of PCs and like their hardware stuff, and I was like, this is not gonna work.
Wow. That
Yeah,
that sounds like a
it was
lot of
really
red flags for you, especially for the neat freak in you. You walk in there, and you're like,
yeah.
oh, I can't work in this.
Yeah, that's true. I was like,
Wow.
it's really, it was a red flag for me in the sense that if they can't organize their space, I'm not sure if they can organize the company
Hmm.
in the same way that I'm envisioning it as well.
Right. Was it a Japanese company or a startup? Or like a Japanese startup or a more international startup or
It was a Japanese startup, yeah.
okay. So I mean there's the stereotype right there. Like a lot of people think of Japanese people, they think of, like a neat freak. Everything's in its place,
Yeah,
everything's stylish, and then that's not
uh-huh.
reality. So wow.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you ever when you do an interview, when you're interviewing with a company, do you ever have like a set of questions that you go through to find out about their culture around QA?
Yeah, so I usually ask them how do you see QA, the QA process from the moment I join and into the future, or maybe what is your existing test process? Though that's probably the basic question. But I guess another question I also ask is that after I onboard with this, would the company be able to like give funds or like let me freely choose which testing tools I would recommend? And most of them answer yes, but sometimes they're like,
Hmm.
we're kind of on a budget, stuff
Yeah.
like
Do you, for most of the companies you apply at, like with respect to testing tools, I can imagine companies that would have like a QA process already set up. They have a test harness. They're using Selenium. They're using Newman.
that.
And do you ever get the sense that some companies want you to come in and build it all from scratch versus just kind of like work with what they
Yes.
have? Like, which one is more common for you?
Um, since I mostly applied for startups,
Hmm.
it was all like build everything from scratch.
Okay.
Um, all right, another point for that company, I just remembered. They had all of their bugs in a single Google spreadsheet,
Very
and everyone
common.
was
Very
editing.
common.
It was, but it was not locked. They were editing all at the same time, so everything was moving. So I
Yeah.
was like, how do you live like this?
Yeah. Oh, it's all too common. Excel, spreadsheets in general here are just like the everything tool, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least Excel, you could edit it locally, but Google spreadsheets, it just breaks
Hmm.
at the same time. Yeah,
Yeah. I guess that's a warning sign for you, right? If there's too much to set up,
yeah,
like you're not using a bug tracker, an issue tracker, you don't have flows, you don't have tickets. It's like they want you to do
yeah,
everything there. That's a red flag.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. The bug tracker is a really big thing for me because um at least I could like integrate some of my existing knowledge into their existing bug tracker. But if they don't have anything set up, it would be most likely they want you to set up a free version, which
Yeah.
is kind of difficult because the only free versions I kind of trust are the open source ones, and they don't really look visually appealing. If that makes sense.
Right. Right. Like was it Redmine or something? I think it's one of the more popular.
Oh,
And I just look at it, I'm like,
yeah,
clearly this is designed by engineers.
yeah. It's designed by engineers for engineers.
Yeah. Okay. Do you ever try to feel out how combative the QA and developer culture is? Does this make sense?
Mm, in the sense that, do you mean like the friction between dev and QA?
Yeah, like sometimes developer teams see QA as like their enemy. They're like, you got all you guys have, like you guys only have bad things to say. Like you're bringing us all of these problems. These problems don't matter right now. Like, do you have a way to feel that out before you join a company?
Mm-hmm. So, uh, I kind of asked them if they will be if the dev team is kind of open to suggestions,
Hmm.
and I think most companies say, "Oh yeah, we are," but sometimes when you kind of talk to the developers, they and like I think this is during like technical part of the interview for QA. Um, they would be like and I would like suggest some changes, and they would be like, "This is not a bug. This is a feature." Something that's the most common thing I would hear. Not like combative, but like they're kind of defensive. This is their
Yeah,
baby, so of course I kind of understand that.
dismissive.
But yeah, at the same time, I'd be like, maybe I could suggest something better. Um, so it kind of gives them the idea that, okay, maybe I'll try to look into your suggestions.
Hmm.
And most of them are actually like open-minded in the sense that they would consider your suggestion at least before like scrapping it. But there are some people who I've worked with and internationally that um once I file a bug report, they would be dismissive. They would be like, "Have you tried turning your computer on and off again?" It would be like that, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Of course,
Hmm.
I would test, I will do everything and that I know of, and present you with a workaround if ever I find one. But this bug is just, it exists. I can't find a workaround for it, something like that."
That can be that's one of my personal peeves with QA at my company. Like sometimes I can see people being a little dismissive like that, or like you said,
Mm,
defensive about something. I'll be like, it's
mm,
fine. Just like they put time into like discovering this and investigating it. Like the least you could
ah,
do is kind of consider it. But I think it's
yeah.
a big problem for any. any two kinds of positions where you have one that only gives a certain type of feedback. QA never like QA can confirm that everything works as expected, but there's no like you did a great
Uh-huh.
job. It's like it works as expected.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I choose to at least try to be like, oh, you did a great job on this, but I think this could use more improvement,
Hmm.
something like that.
The sandwich? Are you
Um,
talking about the sandwich?
yeah, because QA is sandwiched between like upper management and dev,
Yeah.
so you
Then
have to find compromise, I
mhm,
guess.
you do so if you in the case like say you found something wrong, maybe not like a breaking bug, and you want to file a ticket. For you, in your experience, does that involve communicating directly with the dev about the ticket, or do you have to go through product, or do you have to go through a project manager? Like, what is the workflow like for that?
In my current company, we do not have a project manager
Hmm.
or like a product manager. So I have actually proposed to set up a QA Slack channel where I would just like dump a bug or like a bug list and be like, what do you guys think about this?
Hmm.
And they would either be like, oh yeah, it's a very easily reproducible bug, please make a ticket for it, or they'll be like, okay, let me find the root cause first
Hmm.
and then we can like discuss it more in depth, something like that.
Hmm. Do you find that you make tickets for everything, even if it's not immediately addressable, in order to be able to track them?
Yeah, a big thing about QA, I think, is that you have to be able to track the bugs. Um, Jira makes things easier because it has like a better search,
Hmm.
was that the JQL thing? They have a bit more flexible like searching
Hmm.
functionalities compared to other bug tracking tools. But for some people, they don't have access to that. So I think like adding the context in like threads or like Slack channels is a helpful thing that could make your QA process easier.
How do you handle? So let's assume you have all these tickets in a backlog, like given triage, you have like everything written out, the description, acceptance
Mhm.
criteria, reproduction. How do you
Uh-huh.
handle stale bugs? For example, let's say you filed a
Mhm.
bug, it's low priority, but it's going to take some time to fix. You filed this bug a year ago, and at some point along the line, somebody developed something that made that bug meaningless. Like it just erased the code that made the bug. Like, do you have like a
Uh-huh.
process or a way of making sure that you can prune these stale tickets?
Um, so for my current company, we actually discussed this. I propose that every 3 months we should check stale tickets and then kind of like have a discussion on whether we should close these tickets since they're probably not going to be done at all, or like kind of increase the priority, something like that, or move it into a different release. Um, but I think we had to find a middle ground because dev are also busy working on newer features. So we kind of agreed on doing it every release, which is like every 6 months, I think.
And then,
Yeah.
so it's like an agreement that like every release you're gonna kind of triage in some tech debt tickets. You're just gonna pick
Yeah,
some and
yeah.
prioritize them, and like here's all your development work, and here's like the tech debt stuff you're gonna handle.
Yeah. I think it's important because sometimes they forget that they had tech technical debts and like some tickets that could also be used to improve the application.
Hmm.
Currently, they just kind of get forgotten. But when you bring them up, they're like, "Oh, right, we made that kind of suggestion before. Let's use that then."
Yeah.
It kind of can become helpful in some cases. Yeah.
So you're doing all this manually then? Like you're the one who's like keeping track of the calendar. You're like before the release, I need to remind people about these tickets. It's all like manual stuff that you're doing.
Yeah. I tried to look for some what's those automation tools that could help my workflow become easier. So I guess when it comes to reporting, it's easier, but in like tracking these bugs, you
Hmm.
could filter them by a specific filter that you've set.
Hmm.
So you don't have to click through everything one by one.
Hmm.
But in terms of having to remind them, it really they tend to forget. So I have to go into there manually.
Yeah. Yeah, Google Calendar to the rescue for me. I make a reminder 6 months in the future, and I'm saying like these are the things you got to remember. So, is
Yeah.
is your QA process right now at your current job? Is it mostly manual overall, or do you have automation in there as well?
The devs do have automation
Hmm.
testing for backend setup, but that is more closer to unit testing.
Hmm.
I did propose kind of an end-to-end testing, which would make regression tests easier on my end, I would say, because sometimes just a little bit of changes in the front end breaks the entire thing. So I think that would be helpful. But at the moment, we're still in the process of setting it up, so everything is still manual.
Do you do you see a future where your like ideal future where your QA process is integrated into CI/CD, or do you think it's more helpful for you if the QA process is separate from the development CI/CD and unit tests and everything?
I think it's actually helpful if I integrate it into the development CI/CD because it's as close. What's that term? The closer it is to the code, the easier it is to go through all that stuff. That's why it's also a advice in the QA world to have the least amount of like visual automated testing. Although I have seen some tools like Apply tools having AI integrations into their visual testing functionalities in order to um, make the QA process a bit smoother
Hmm.
in all aspects. But the problem with that is that it costs a lot of money
Yeah,
to integrate those kinds of tools into the system.
yeah.
Yeah,
So for you, ideally, QA would be a set of QA tests on the backend API, for example.
yeah, that could be automated,
Hmm.
but I would say that not everything can be automated,
Hmm.
but most can be automated.
Okay. Do you so for example, something I often hear about between devs and QA with regard to automatic and unit testing is like if QA is testing the API, then why isn't backend just making the test for the API with the unit tests? Have you heard this before?
Mm-hmm, I see.
Yeah.
Uh, it's kind of not something that I have delved in completely, I
Hmm.
mean, but um the there is a tendency for the back end tests or back end to break, to work, but then the API to break and vice versa, something like that. So my approach is that the more tests you have, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with, as you were saying, end-to-end testing. So you have full stack integration
Yeah.
testing run by QA. Um,
Yeah.
it can be frustrating as a back end engineer. It can be frustrating sometimes when you have a ticket, you have the acceptance criteria, you have the QA test criteria, and for me,
Mhm.
I do my smoke testing and everything before I merge. So I use the QA testing criteria. QA comes in and tests it. I'm like, we're just testing the same thing. Like, why are
Uh,
you testing a thing? I just tested in exactly the same way. So,
yeah.
do you see a place for QA that does more than back end or front end can do individually, where QA has like a more holistic approach that they can bring to the table?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I would say that for me personally, I leave the unit testing up to the development team.
Hmm.
They do that all in their on their side. For me, I mostly do integration and acceptance testing. So that is something that I am more specialized to do since their knowledge is mostly on code. I think I would be more informed with my testing if there is something I can interact with. So maybe the UI. So that would be what I would do.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. Like that's the reason you have a back end and front end separation, right?
Yeah.
Separation of
Yeah.
concerns. Um,
Mhm.
have you found any differences? For example, um, Yaraku is basically translation, right? A translation
Yeah.
service. Have you found any differences or difficulties in doing QA for a site in multiple languages or an application in
Yes.
multiple languages? Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is something that I encountered in during this release. I was telling you earlier that off record that we just finished the August release. I think it was 2 weeks ago,
Hmm.
something like that. And I during that time I was really busy because I would discover some bugs that are only language specific. So it kind of gives me more work to do,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I am quite familiar with a few other languages, so it's not that difficult. It's just kind of overwhelming.
Hmm. So, do you think that's an important part of being QA at a company like Yaraku? Like, if you were to hire another QA engineer, you definitely want somebody who's familiar with working in multiple languages as opposed to just English.
Yeah, that I think that is very helpful because I personally think that my language knowledge in Japanese helped me get the position, but they won't tell me.
They won't tell you.
But it's just a personal thought I had.
Hmm.
But the our clients are mostly Japanese companies, so they make use of Japanese to English or Japanese to Korean translation, stuff
Hmm.
like that. And since I have knowledge in Japanese and English, it's very easy for me to detect translation errors or like of course there is also a feature called uh, quality assistant tool
Hmm.
that our app has. So it highlights some parts of the text that could use kind of like uh,
Like a human
mm,
boost.
I kind of like identifies
Okay.
misspellings, incorrect number translation, stuff like that. Maybe kind of a human boost
Yeah.
like
Okay. Like, have
that.
you like you should take a second look at this part. Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of highlights parts of the text that needs reach the checking or validation.
Hmm.
And I have noticed that my knowledge in Japanese was able to help with that aspect specifically. Yeah.
Does Yaraku like officially support this in any way with like providing free Japanese training or subsidizing you going to
Oh.
Japanese courses or anything?
Yeah, they actually provide everyone in the company, or at least like the the non-Japanese people in the company, who are mostly developers, by the way. They provide us with um, free two sessions of Japanese language training from a specialized Japanese language school. So that's like 45 minutes every session and two free sessions every month. I availed of two more sessions. I think it's pricey. It's like 2,000 yen per session. So I asked them to like deduct the additional sessions from my salary
Hmm.
to like make my jobs better.
Do they? So, for example, if they're providing you with this assistance, if you get like N4, N3, N2, do you get like a salary bonus or increase for those?
I'm not sure, but they mentioned that they can help with I think it was subsidy for successful GLPD applications,
Hmm.
but I haven't really talked deeply to them with them yet. We're still kind of considering because I am kind of scared to fail.
Yeah.
And I'm considering taking N2, but it's kind of a really high gap between N3 and N2. So I'm kind of scared of considering that.
It is. Even with Kanken, the Japanese kanji test, they have all these like
Uh-huh.
pre-levels, right? They have like Junnikyu and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
can absolutely see that gap. Do you
Mhm.
feel like you're at professionally? Do you feel like you're at a level where knowing more Japanese would help you in your position doing QA at Yaraku? Like, do you feel like you're sort of like a barrier where like if you don't know more Japanese, it's going to be hard to improve as QA there?
Mm-hmm. I I have noticed that a lot of the documents getting translated are business related. So a lot of them tend to be like N2, N1 level. And I just basically use the app and to check the translations and other machine translation engines, machine translation providers, in order to verify that I'm seeing correct results.
Hmm.
But with my current Japanese, of course, there's like a big leap that I have to like get through in order to be able to properly do the QA
Hmm.
checking just for Japanese language.
It sounds like it would reduce a lot of the time for you then. If or even if
Yeah,
you just had like another QA engineer who had Japanese ability but maybe less English ability, and the two of you together could figure these things out.
yeah, we could just, combine our brain cells
Yeah,
together
yeah.
and make a better app. Yeah, that's true.
Do you have like regular one-on-ones where you talk to a manager about these types of issues?
Yeah, I actually have a one-on-one with my manager later today.
Hey, I just wanted to let you know I had an interview with Tokyo Dev. I spilled all the beans on the company.
And no, no, no. I informed them already that I will be having this interview. But for it's more of like um the process, the company, and like any issues I'm having, like not just on a professional level, but maybe on a personal level. And my manager also tries to like do help as much as he can. But yeah, it's a really welcoming culture, if I may say.
That's good to hear. Does your manager
Mhm.
help you like on a professional level? Do you
Mhm.
do you I don't know if you want to do this. I don't know what happened to my
Mhm.
voice there. I don't know if you want to do this at all. Like, does your manager also help you figure out the steps you need to take to advance to, if you want to be a more senior engineer, if you want to be like a
Mm.
principal, if you want to be staff, you want to be a manager? Is there any talk about that?
Yeah, he did mention that if you want to like try a different role, we could talk about it. But I like my role right now. I'm running my own team by myself.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun for me, so I'm not considering that for now. But I did talk to him about wanting to advance more as a QA engineer, and we are considering having the. I am considering at least taking the ISTQB, which is
Mhm.
the international qualification for software testers. It's recognized uh, in all in most countries. So I thought it would be helpful to like get that boost, not just for me, but having that someone qualified in the company would also kind of boost the company's credentials. So we are considering that one as well.
It's great that you were able to bring this up to your manager, and your manager's like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
like I'm in. That's
yeah.
a
He was like, okay, let's see if we have a budget for it, and we'll
mhm.
discuss it more in depth. Yeah.
That's good. So would you also like, let's say you had another international QA engineer, would you recommend them to apply to your company? Assuming your company had openings, like would you recommend your company to them again?
Yeah, of course. Especially if I'm still here. For I'm planning to stay here for a long time, but we don't know what will happen in the future.
Hmm.
But if I have someone that I would like to that is asking me to apply at Yaraku, I would definitely recommend applying for a position in the company. Yeah.
Mhm. I have to remind everybody this is not a paid ad. These are Grace's true thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course,
Mhm.
if I would like, I'm not like going to say something else
Yeah.
behind
Right.
that concerns, but yeah, these are my true thoughts about
Hmm.
my current company. Yeah.
That's good. Do you have anything else you want to add that we didn't cover? We've been going for over an hour now.
Oh.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to
mm,
add?
uh, Currently, I think we've gone through a lot of the topics that I wanted to discuss. So
Hmm.
I guess no, I don't have any
Okay.
other things I would want to discuss. But feel free to chat with me on LinkedIn, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. So Grace's name is there, there. You can see
Somewhere.
it below her camera. You can find her on LinkedIn. She's also on the Tokyo Dev server. She's active as Gray. I always forget if it's
Yeah,
with an E or an A. I think it's with an A.
it's an A. Yeah,
Yeah, Gray, Gray on Tokyo Dev, and I think you're fairly active, so it's easy to find you.
yeah. Of
So,
course.
okay.
I'm the duck with the pink background.
Yes. In real life, you can recognize her by her hair, which always changes colors.
Not always. Once every few months.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate it,
Yeah,
and this was a great interview.
yeah. Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you for
Okay.
having me.